As the new, it leaves with unanswered questions. Ethical preconceptions of challenge, where and when, become more simple, remain unanswered.
Days, and we'll have the latest in a controversy over a state senator. Fog and low clouds tonight and tomorrow morning, then haze.
Protect your dog or cat right now with the
75,000 generations ago, our ancestors set this program in motion. We will be the first to hear the computer.
It would seem that the more we know, the less we understand. The ultimate computer is set to work on the ultimate question, the meaning of life.
Everything. That is
an answer for you? Yes. Yes, I have. Though I don't think you're going to like it. The answer to everything, life, the universe, and everything is 42.
To the chemists and physicists of the 18th century, mass was the great entity. In the latter 19th and early 20th century, the great reality of the universe was seen to be energy. Scientists studied the relationship between mass and energy. But then, a new concept emerged. Another entity of perhaps equal importance in the cosmic equation: information. Humankind has always been a recorder and user of information. The habits of animals, the course of the seasons, when to sow and when to harvest. Those with the best information survive. But worlds change. Those who have the best information are still the survivors. But the kind of information and the means of gaining it have undergone a revolution in the past 30 years. The games people play are entirely new. Technology has rewritten the rules.
Tonight, Lucy and Suzanne Saunders is here in the studio with us with the reasons why we're going to have to really get involved, whether we're ready for it or not.
At this moment, you, the viewer, are getting information from the television screen. Our ancestors got their experience firsthand, from life.
Grow his orchids.
Increasingly, our experience of the world is gained second-hand.
What if you invite revolution, what many see as the greatest advancement for mankind since the Industrial Revolution? There's no turning back.
The sum total of human knowledge changed very slowly until recent times. One estimate suggests that recorded human knowledge was doubling every 50 years in 1800. Now it doubles every 5 years. It is sometimes seen as an information explosion, but an explosion ends, subsides. There is no end in sight for the present incredible growth in information. One writer on this topic is Barry Jones.
Data is the raw material. Data's the telephone book, if you like. Information is knowing how to use the telephone. Wisdom is really what you get out of it, which makes you decide whether to act in one way or another and become what you hope will be a right decision. Now, I think a lot of people are simply swamped in data. In fact, you can get so much data that it becomes almost unusable unless you are a technician. This is one of the problems, I think, in the Commonwealth Parliament. We're absolutely swamped with data. We have more and more material being plonked on our desks each day. And if in fact you're not looking at it, if in fact the sheer volume of material that you're given is so overwhelming that you don't in fact analyse it in any meaningful way, then you don't draw any useful conclusions from it. And that's the problem of information overload. It's the equivalent of blowing a fuse.
The House is assembled today to discuss the question that computers cause unemployment. I'd like to call on the Leader of the Government, the member for Stewart, to open the case for the government.
Mr. Chairman, I will prove to you that computers do cause unemployment. A computer's task is to replace a certain number of people, meaning computers take the places of people who are...
In the 31st Commonwealth Parliament, sitting in 1980, there were only 2 debates on technology, a total of less than 2 hours.
This report makes clear that the microelectronics could even increase jobs...
The world these children inherit will be determined by the directions we choose. And there is a choice. We can shape technology, or technology can shape us.
Has ever caused long-term unemployment.
Society will just go through another change, move from one lifestyle to another to accommodate progress. There are always plenty of jobs to do and new horizons to explore. This has happened before.
Australia's first computer, the CSIRO's CIRAC-1, designed in the early 50s by Maston Beard and Trevor Pearcey.
Of 20 binary digits tells the machine how to move one particular datum from one part of the machine to another, at the same time carrying out a simple operation upon it, such as addition.
CIRAC was programmed with paper tape, used miles of wiring, large clumsy valves, and required the power of a steam train to run it.
Written by the programmer in a fairly simple computer language on his sheets of paper.
And we now set the data for the problem, and I am setting this on the keyboard registers. This is
the program demonstrated here was just working out repayments on a housing loan.
Number into the machine, and now the next number goes in.
Hailed as a miracle of science in the 1950s, how large would the machine now be to have the same computing power?
I think it would be about 1/4 of an inch square as a silicon chip.
The first electronic computer cost $5 million. Because of the silicon chip, a modern microcomputer costs $2,000, is 1,500 times smaller, 10,000 times cheaper, 17,000 times lighter. It uses 2,800 times less power, and they're getting better every day.
I have said that CIRAC was easy to use. Let me illustrate.
CIRAC was the 4th computer built in the world. But despite this early Australian lead in the field, our computer research area was not funded. The technology was developed abroad, and its owners exported it to Australia. We now import around 98% of the machinery related to information technology. The miniaturization that has occurred has proven unprecedented in the history of technology. 30 years after he designed it, Trevor Pearcey.
Incredible degree of miniaturization, about a reduction of 1 million times over a course of 30 years. It's a factor of 110 years.
Conventional wisdom says that to get something out, you must put something in. The more effort, the greater return. The microchip seems to deny this. The technology has become smaller, but more powerful and cheaper. It is no longer technological change that is amazing, it is the rate of change. Technology is used to improve upon itself. The result is a snowball effect. Here, the computer is used to design a further, more powerful silicon chip. The comparison has been made that if the automobile industry had progressed at such a rate as the integrated circuit industry, a Rolls-Royce would be $2.50 and petrol 1,000,000 miles to the gallon. During the 1960s, the space industry spent millions of dollars on the technology that would take man for the first time to a territory other than his own planet. In an age of growing cynicism and disillusionment with science, the question was often asked, what will the space race bring us? The answer might well have been the information society. The miniaturization that has brought computers into the public domain was spurred on by the need to fit smaller and smaller computers into satellites and rockets. The Cold War, with Russia and the United States vying for supremacy in space, enabled the emergence of the microcomputer. Silicon Valley in California lies just down the road from Stanford University, where the microchip was first developed. Here, people have got the message about information-rich, information-poor. They have been riding the crest of the computer tidal wave. Millionaires are 2 a penny.
We have a lot of Ferraris, and especially red Ferraris here in Silicon Valley. Our local Ferrari dealer in Sunnyvale, which is the capital of Silicon Valley, sells more Ferraris than any other dealer but one, that one being in Beverly Hills, where movie stars, of course, buy Ferraris also, but we're number 2 in Ferraris.
The valley is awash with firms that use computer technology. From a company servicing the weather forecasting needs of the entire world's shipping lines to companies that provide the latest in computer-aided design for architects and engineers. Writing the first comprehensive work on Silicon Valley, Everett Rogers.
We're seeing a society in which information is the scarce ingredient, the valued ingredient, rather than energy as in the past, or industrial production as in the past. And I think that dimension, information and access and possession of information, because this change is happening so rapidly, can widen gaps and make greater inequalities between nations and within nations, within a society, than ever in the past. And I think that has a possible negative. It poses a threat to the stability of societies.
No, it does not sign. Because you did not sign, you just put it.
UNESCO has claimed unequivocally that countries that don't take the information society into account and adopt policies in that direction will be third world countries by the year 2000.
As a nation, Australia is doing very little to move towards the information society. There's certainly no policies that have been enunciated by government in this area.
From the New South Wales Institute for Technology, Vance Gledhill.
In some other countries, there have been express policies to educate politicians, to educate all of the youth, and to educate workers. For example, in France, every school child has to learn computing as part of their high school curriculum, as they do in Singapore. In Norway, many of the workers are receiving formal education on computers as part of their work on the job, so that they can be involved in decisions about computers and the way they'll be used in their workplace.
For a long time, people thought of the computer as a number cruncher. But the computer's capacity is far more. Computers solve traffic problems, design aircraft. They play backgammon and can chat amongst themselves intelligently. They can even carry out a little psychotherapy. But perhaps their greatest importance in the future lies in their use in communication. Without the computer, a modern and effective telephone system would be unthinkable. The world's telephone system is the most complex information network known. Telephone numbers are constantly changing. The information needs updating. Every year, there are more telephone numbers and less trees. A quiet revolution is stirring in the French port of Saint-Malo. Here, on the coast of Brittany, the government of France has begun a daring experiment to launch every French household into the computer age. The townspeople of Saint-Malo are the first to receive computer terminals provided free of charge by the state-run telephone company. The French call the idea télématique, the marriage of the telephone with the computer. Practically, what télématique means is putting computer power into the hands of people in their homes.
Je viens pour vous installer l'annuaire. Où souhaitez-vous l'installer? La prise téléphonique, une prise de courant.
The Saint-Malo experiment is part of a top priority plan to develop the French computer industry. The initial reason for distributing the electronic terminals is to replace the telephone book.
Peut-être avez-vous de la famille ou des amis à Saint-Malo?
The terminals at the moment are just used for locating telephone numbers. But in the future, they can be linked to electronic mail, computerized shopping, electronic banking, and a host of other computerized information networks. The prediction is that mass computerization will take hold and become as indispensable to society as electricity. France is plunging into the future with a policy committed to socializing the computer. In France, being able to use a computer will become as common as being able to use a telephone.
Hello! Hello! Hi! Who? London! Hi, Dad. There's a bloke keeps on saying London's calling, London's calling.
120 years ago, when universal primary education came out, there were very great rewards for people who could read and write, and there were very great penalties for those who could not. And I think that in the age of the information revolution and the post-industrial society that we're in, there'll be very real economic and psychological rewards for the people who can master the technology and who are on top of it, and whose worldview is enormously expanded. And I think there'll be very great penalties imposed for those who, for a whole variety of reasons, haven't got the intellectual equipment that enables them to get the best out of the system and not the worst.
In Australia, the information-rich are already using couplers to patch the computer into the telephone and gain access to the large variety of information networks. But it is more likely that the general public will first encounter two-way access to data banks by one of the video text systems. These systems offer a variety of information. Unlike the one-way systems, such as teletext, you get to choose what information you want, and you get to talk back. The communication is two-way. By choosing from the menu offered, you narrow down to the specific item. This kind of system is already in operation overseas. Whether it be entertainment, stock market reports, booking a seat on an airline, there is no limit to the information that could be available. Situated fittingly in Silicon Valley is the Institute for the Future, an American think tank. Working there on video text systems is Australian John Tiedemann.
With the video text technology, if you extrapolate and push yourself out about 10 or 15 years, that you have all the components in the household to shop at home, to undertake your banking at home, to work at home, to be educated at home, probably to get divorced at home, and so on, as well as all sorts of beautiful monitoring devices ranging from energy management, control.
Tiedemann sees the new technology as both centralizing and decentralizing. The users become decentralized, but the source becomes Big Brother.
You can look at these services being provided, and in the right or wrong set of competitive environments, you can see that the service for banking, for example, for investment in money markets, can be provided by one international organisation. Why shouldn't the people of Australia put their money into T. Rowe Price and the New York Money Exchange? It's the same set of digits they've got to key in. It's the same notion as far as an electronic transaction. So you can see a combination of both things. And unless we're very careful, we may in fact be moving towards this notion of even more centralisation of power.
Reg Pearson lectures in computing science at Deakin University, near Geelong. After checking his electronic diary and collecting his electronic mail, he wants to contact a student. The student needs help with one of his projects and is asked for assistance by computer. The university quad is deserted. For this postgraduate diploma is an off-campus course. Instead of lectures and seminars, pupils communicate with their teachers by phone and computer. The students can live anywhere. The marriage of these two technologies, the telephone and the computer, offers whole new horizons in education and marketing.
Hello, darling. This is Jaja Gabor. Are you surprised that I called? Talk to me, darling.
Hello, this is Reverend Jesse Jackson calling from Operation Push. We're now using a new telecomputer system that lets you talk back. We need two-way communications.
To start off with, in Dallas, we have a cross-reference bank of people of 72 million Americans who are cross-referenced as to their voter's registration, driver's license, specialty purchases, and magazine subscriptions. And for instance, if we would like to zero in on a particular segment of the population for a particular call, we can say, for instance, take this area. We can zoom in on this area just like a rifle shot.
I have an important telecomputer call from J.D. Sumner, Elvis Presley's bass singer and closest friend. One moment, and I'll connect you.
Hello, I'm J.D. Sumner, Elvis's bass singer and friend for 25 years, going back long before Heartbreak Hotel. If he were alive today, I know
the tape
that
then
Elvis
takes over and gets to a point where it would ask the person the first question.
I understand that you're one of Elvis's real fans. Is that right?
If the person does not respond to that first question, the tape then prompts the person and restates the question.
I want you to talk to me. You are a real Elvis fan, aren't you?
Oh, yes, I am.
Elvis took me into his confidence. I'll tell you the real truth about it.
Once in a while you hear somebody say, I don't like speaking to a computer, and then they go right on and give us what we want to know anyway.
And there's something that Elvis, I know, would want you to have. The one thing besides being able to hear Elvis sing that his fans cherished most was an Elvis scar.
The person gets to hear the whole tape and give any answers that are required. And at that point in time, if we desire, we can play back what the person has told us to confirm whatever commitment or promise that person has made.
For only $19.95. Elvis would have wanted it this way.
In the collection area, we used it for account collection, master charge, Visa collection, past due automobile accounts, bad check collection.
Jordan Marsh is a very patient company, don't you agree? They've waited a long time now, right? Well, I'm John Johnson from Jordan Marsh, and my patience has finally reached its limit. I expect payment now. This debt will not wait any longer. Will you be mailing the amount due today or tomorrow? Speak to me. Your response or lack of it will become a permanent part of your record. Will you be mailing the amount due today or tomorrow?
I'll take care of it today for sure, and I'm sorry I let it slip.
And will you be paying this by certified check or money order?
It'll be a certified check. I'm going to my bank this afternoon.
Now, so that you realize that this is a commitment and not merely a promise, I will play your commitment back to you now.
I'll take care of this today for sure, and I'm sorry I let it slip. It'll be a certified check. I'm going to my bank this afternoon.
Nothing short of the next 2 days will do. I'll be looking for your payment. Goodbye.
Good. What did you write? Can you see what you wrote? Yeah. What did you put in there?
At the Woden School in Canberra, the new technology is finding its way into the classroom. This school is for the handicapped. For these children to overcome disabilities, a special kind of patience is required. It is a patience eminently suited to a machine. James practices basic skills being led by the pre-programmed memory of the computer. Unlike many adults, children approach computer technology without fear, without preconception. This type of technology is not difficult to develop, but because the market is limited, so are the funds available. Doug is a bright child, but he didn't seem to want to read until the computer came along.
Read the sentences again. The choices are Wimborg, side, wise. The sentences read. Shorty is thy best friend. He saved thy wife. Shorty saved thy breath. This too. Good work, Doug. There, then, the sentences read. Suddenly, a big cat jumped.
In the classrooms of tomorrow, the computer will be as common as chalk is today.
To the... Good work, Doug.
We can pull down that set 3, retrieve it only if it's also got mangroves in it, and it's telling us that there are 2 articles.
Selecting the right piece of information from a group of others is the computer's stock in trade. For a person to study the alternatives and make choices is a time-consuming exercise. Computers choose from billions of alternatives in virtually no time at all. Here, a search is being instigated for reference articles, in this case, relating to water salinity. Over the telephone and telecommunications network, the computer searches the files for any reference and reports the number of documents contained in the base. Starting from a general inquiry, the researcher can quickly narrow down the area of interest to the specific information required. A researcher in Melbourne instantly checks the files held in California. This is one of the world's largest commercial databases, Dialog, run by Lockheed in California. It's available for searching 22 hours a day from anywhere in the world. The first customers to use this service were libraries and the information centers of big business. Universities and research groups soon followed suit. But today, a new customer is emerging. Small business and the individual.
We have several commercial databases, data banks if you want to call them that. CompuServe, The Source, and others. If you connect to them, you can get a tremendous amount of information. There are 22,000 pages of new information put into CompuServe every day.
At the moment, this base has 60 billion bytes of data on disk storage. The equivalent of 60 million summaries of technical reports, articles, newspaper stories, financial statements. In terms of storage and access, old systems just can't compete. Traditionally, the library has been the symbol of the learning and knowledge of humankind. But the methods of physically storing information have not changed radically since the use of papyrus scrolls. Perhaps in the future, we will look back at the library as a quaint, old-fashioned, first-generation database. Computers are changing the methods that people use in scholarly research, and not just in the sciences. In all faculties, computers are used to solve problems. Director of Computing Facilities at Stanford University, Ralph Gorin.
But we already have some professors who say, for me, the computer is the library. Books, in their traditional way, although very nice objects, you can take them home and read them in bed, have various difficulties. They are expensive to print, they're expensive to store. In a library situation, they are expensive to circulate. Libraries in the future will take advantage of such technologies as video discs for the purpose of storing the information that is customarily stored today on ordinary books. Moreover, the medium provides very interesting new opportunities. For example, in addition to the text of a book, you could include in the book illustrations or illustrations that move.
Just outside New York is IBM's T.J. Watson Research Center. Roger Traub is a leading medical researcher.
Epilepsy is a group of disorders which involve the brain, in which populations of cells...
In the past, science reached a point where to progress, the scientists' own sensors were not sufficient. The microscope extended the function of the eye.
This part of the brain, which is called the cerebral cortex. This is the so-called neocortex.
To study concepts of such complexity as the workings of neural mechanisms, we have reached a point where the brain is not sufficient.
Well, it's impossible without a computer. I mean, to describe the behavior of one nerve cell requires a computer. Even if a simple model of a nerve cell requires a computer, and we have a very detailed model. And to simulate the behavior of 100 of them not only requires a computer, it requires a very large computer.
Go left, 0.87 meters. Go right. This is a slow day. Go right, 3.47 meters.
Making computers speak was not overly difficult. Making them understand when spoken to is proving more trying.
Might be interested in, period. This product.
The problem is not so much with the machine as the way we speak.
Nuts.
Michael Pickney.
One of the main reasons having the computer recognize ordinary sentences is difficult is that when people talk, they tend to string words together. And for example, let's take a phrase like gas shortage. When you're speaking like the way we are now, you don't say gas pause shortage. It comes out like gas shortage, and if you looked at the speech waveform, you wouldn't see any signs of an S in gas. All you'd see is the SH in shortage. And there are a whole bunch of phenomena like this that make it very difficult to spot when words end and when words begin.
Has been.
This is not a computer understanding speech. The typist simulates the responses of a machine for a psychological study on business use. When a computer that can recognize general speech is developed, its creators intend to be ready for the business market.
Already, the Japanese actually claim it may have a product that can recognize words spoken in isolation with 1,000-word vocabulary. And by the end of the decade, you might see products with 5,000 or 10,000 word vocabularies.
That's Peter Hopkins on 478 from Rex. Please to do a memo on Rex paper.
The first steps have been made towards the automated office of the future. The word processor is a common piece of office technology. It saves paper and time. It increases efficiency when used properly. But it can come with the twin problems of unemployment and the de-skilling of those who remain. The secretary of the past can become the machine minder of the future. At MIT, a specialist in office technology, Marvin Searblue.
Well, there have been a large number of predictions made of everything from a wonderful world of the future to a terrible, alienated world taken over by computers. I think that almost every prediction that's been made about what will happen is true. The question is, where will a particular response occur? That is, in what kind of an office and by taking what kinds of actions can you achieve that desirable situation in which work becomes more interesting, in which the drudgery is removed, in which people learn new skills, and how do you avoid the kind of consequence that work becomes repetitive and boring, you feel chained to a terminal or a machine, and you'd rather have the old way back again. So the question is not so much what will occur, because very many things will occur. The question is how to get the right things to occur.
We must remember that computers will be able to do a wide variety of jobs as its technology develops. The Thomson Report, published by the Foundation for Australian Resources, shows that the work of at least 250,000 clerks in Australia was being done by computers.
There is an old proverb: if work were such a good thing, the rich would have kept it for themselves. In the so-called golden ages of history, there has always been a flowering of leisure for the rich. This leisure time has been enabled by a slave class who did the work. For the first time in our history, there is the possibility of a slave class that does not depend upon people. A slave class that does not necessarily involve human degradation. The machines of the future could be our slave class.
I think the compulsory work ethic is obsolete, and so it ought to be, because what you find is that if people don't work, they are immediately devalued. The fact is, we're not too sure what will happen to work. I suspect that we may have to reallocate work, and I would hope that one of the effects of the technological revolution would be to enable people to have of abolishing all compulsory retirement ages. If people want to work until they're 80 and they're able to do it, terrific. If they want to retire at the age of 50, also terrific. That people ought to be encouraged to have a diversity of lifestyles and to get up when they want to. And of course, to do that, you'd have to have a national superannuation scheme and some sort of economic support.
Between 1970 and 1980, the value of robots produced annually in Japan multiplied 32,000 times, from 19 million to over $615 billion. As Japan cuts into the world car market, so will other countries have to robotize their factories. Japan, the most robotized country on Earth, has some 10,000 industrial robots. Australia has about 100. This is partly because of lower output, but also because of the social disruption that would occur under our present industrial relations.
In this country, I think that our leaders are following a policy of no policy.
Our policy of confrontation is criticized by many leading academics. At Sydney University, John Bennett.
But in Europe, the situation is a little different. In Western Germany and Scandinavia, the law requires, for example, that if somebody is going to introduce automation into his organization, he must begin at a very early stage to plan with the unions who are going to be affected.
Recently, this class of primary school children in Sydney voted overwhelmingly that computers caused unemployment. But then, they got their own.
The number of yes votes.
There were 23 yes votes.
And the member for Linda, the number of no votes.
28 no votes.
So this House believes that computers do not cause unemployment.
Not a total reversal, but enough to suggest that their opinions have been changed by their enthusiasm for the machine.
There is no doubt that there's going to be major shifts in occupational requirements. I personally see that as a painful exercise that we have to go through, unfortunately in a quicker time scale than we've ever had to before. For example, with the industrial or the agricultural revolution, we'll have to do this in a period of 20 years. But I see it as only a shift from one employment area to another. And I don't see the computer causing long-term, uncontrollable unemployment.
The world is undergoing the greatest demographic change it has ever seen. In the third world, the population is moving from the country to the city in unprecedented numbers, just as they did in the West during our Industrial Revolution. But now, in the great cities of the Western world, the movement is possibly being reversed. This is borne out by the census figures for London and New York. In the information revolution, people may leave the cities. Max Newton is the financial editor for the New York Post. But he chooses not to work under the shadow of the Brooklyn Bridge. Newton lives and works in Darien on the Connecticut coast. Not as fast moving, but when the bright lights or his boss Rupert Murdoch lure him to New York, it's only a couple of hours' drive. Newton does his work by computer.
I can't see any reason why, I don't know how many millions of people a day go into Manhattan, into aluminium and steel boxes and lock themselves in little square offices to work. There's a great deal of that work could be done at home.
Already, great numbers of Manhattan-based companies have their typing done by women working from home in the suburbs. Dictation is recorded over the telephone, and using a home keyboard, the copy is sent back to the word processing computer in Manhattan.
Big city centres, I would think, would be bound to be affected eventually by this because, you know, who wants to be a commuter? Who wants to go through that rubbish? You might just as well relocate vast areas of white-collar information processing of all kinds elsewhere.
New York City has lost 10% of its population in the past 10 years. Borough is just about as far as you can get from New York. But the computer is having its effect here as well. The residents of Borough and surrounding countryside get a service few people in the city can expect.
How are you today?
Yes, what Frank wants to know is you've got those.
When you have a prescription filled, if you're on any other medication, there is a strong possibility the new drug could cause a reaction. The reaction may not be harmful. It may merely cancel the positive effects of one of the drugs. But a combination of two or more of the prescribed drugs available can be dangerous. The combinations and permutations are almost infinite. No chemist, however well informed, could keep that information in their head, but they can keep it in the computer. This system is self-contained, but it could be online, whereby terminals in chemist shops are connected to a central computer.
The government layout, you have the doctor and you could prescribe them virtually straight away.
Of course, this chemist also uses the computer for clerical assistance. And clerical jobs for young people are not easy to find in a small New South Wales country town. In the musical sphere, the microprocessor has changed the way that musicians see music. And in fact, they do see the music. The Fairlight CMI is an Australian invention. In the past, composers have had to define the sounds they wanted in terms of the instruments that were available. Now the musician can describe the exact sound by its physical appearance. Totally new sounds can be created, limited only by the imagination. The purist may argue that it's just not the same. Somehow, it lacks the creativity. But the argument is hard to sustain. After all, the computer, like the violin, is a tool. Computer games have taken the developed world by storm. They're not games of chance. The games require skill and problem solving. As the player becomes more skilled, the machine automatically sets a more difficult problem. The vital difference between computer games of today and those that died out in the mid-70s is that these games appear to have intelligence. They're programmed so that as you get better, so do they. The manufacturers have combined this problem solving with drama and humor, the perfect ingredients for a best-selling thriller. And bestseller it is. In the United States this year, video game players spent $5 billion. That's the equivalent of 75,000 years of game playing. And that doesn't include computer games in the home. It's almost twice the gross of the American movie industry. It's a lot of lunch money. The computer chip means that mechanized arms that once could have only one function can now perform a variety of tasks for the handicapped. The aids can be programmed with different instructions. This reading device for the blind scans the page, converting print into the spoken word. Because of their expense, there are only 2 of these machines in Australia. If there were a larger market, they would be cheaper and be improved more quickly. Disabled people are also handicapped by the fact that there are not enough of them to be a commercially viable market. The applications of the microprocessor are limited only by the budget. At Macquarie University, Ron Atchison.
They're answer to a lot of our prayers because they're so inexpensive, $8 and $10, something like that. But the real problem is having the people that know how to use them, that can design the peripherals that go with them, because every microprocessor normally needs a great stack of peripheral gear, and having the gear, the electronic gear, with it to develop the system and correct all the faults and get the whole design going properly. So you spend your $8 for a microprocessor and perhaps $100,000 or so to get the thing going.
At Adelaide University, research into a prototype for a device that could revolutionize communication between quadriplegic and computer. Intended for a person who has accurate control only over their eyes, this application tracks the relationship between the highlight of the eye and the pupil as it moves. A camera, using infrared light, reads which way the person is looking and passes the information onto the computer. Communication is established between person and computer, the same concept as others using a keyboard. Once communication is established, just by looking, different functions can be chosen. The computer is used as a tool to communicate and to act. The areas that will change in the 1980s are the service areas that are routine and repetitive. They will be replaced by computer operations with greater speed and accuracy. In the United States, the growth area in computers is the home computer market. And for those who do not have their own, you can hire computer time at your local shopping center. It is becoming commonplace for enterprising children to write software for the local shopkeeper. Perhaps home computers will provide more than just entertainment. At MIT, Joel Moses.
I haven't quite seen a dramatic change in family patterns as a result of this, and it may never be. But I think in the long run, the recreational aspects of home computers will only be a component. My hope still is that the major impact will be in education.
At the moment, there are fewer than 10,000 personal computers in Australian homes. But the suggestion is that by 1990, there will be over 1 million. Will the home computer become as powerful and all-pervading as the telephone?
The reason computers could make a difference is because it is a very much more powerful technology than any one that we've ever had in the home before. It is an interactive technology. It is one which is knowledge-based, and one we really ought to put in a lot more emphasis than we have been.
And they will become increasingly important as a tool of communication, as a way to send a message, a personalized message from you to someone else electronically, as from office to office or home to home, as a way to obtain information like news from a data bank. With a home computer, I can now access at $5 an hour in evenings and weekends a computer information base that has the front pages of a dozen of the world's most famous newspapers.
At the Caulfield Institute of Technology, Kevin Fitzgerald heads a research bureau looking at the problem of computer crime and misuse. The sort of misuse that resulted in $253 million being wrongly paid out in the pharmaceutical area in 1980. Because of the intense concentration of information in the computer, an error or criminal act against it can magnify the problem out of all proportion.
If we do want to knock out an organisation, I guess the computer is a target. We must recognise this and protect ourselves from it.
The possibility of computer terrorism is a very real problem. If information is power, and that power is concentrated in a very small area, then the very core of a society can be exposed. The technology brings with it situations not thought of before. It moves at a faster pace than the less tangible structures of society. We are placed in predicaments which challenge our ethics, our legal system. President of the Victorian Society for Computers and the Law, Julian Burnside.
I think technology is ahead of the statutes and it's ahead of the common law as well, because you have the problem that lawyers, as a rule, don't understand what computers are about. They don't understand the words that computer people use. They generally don't understand the way computers work. They don't understand the nature of programming. So any problem which arises, which is unique to computers and computer operations, will not be understood by lawyers and is not specifically covered by existing common law and statute law.
Evidence produced by a computer is admissible in court. But if a computer generates records for itself, and this is quite often done when someone logs on or uses a password, for example, then this evidence is not admissible.
The difficulty, of course, is that those are the very records which the legislation doesn't allow you to admit in evidence. so the only useful evidence for a prosecution is not available to you. And recently, one case was dismissed at the committal stage because the relevant evidence was the terminal from which a transaction had been committed. That transaction would then identify the teller who operated the terminal as the person who had altered the relevant bank account. That was the critical piece of evidence to secure a conviction, and at the committal stage the defendant was discharged because that evidence wasn't admissible against her.
Even the definition of what is a criminal act is in the process of change. In California, the preparatory stages of computer crime are now criminal offences in themselves, but not in Australia.
Theft of information from a computer, theft of software from a computer, is very expensive to the party that loses what it's paid for. It doesn't involve any serious crime as a matter of law. It may not involve any crime at all, depending on how it's done. If you tap into someone else's system by a remote data terminal, you can copy their programs or copy their data, and as long as you're using your own material, your own tapes and discs, it seems that you haven't committed any offence at all. Organised crime, with all its resources, is likely, in my opinion, to be the greatest source of immense computer crime in the next decade. And if we aren't able to catch each stage of the operation, we might as well just give it to them in the first place.
The Industrial Revolution extended our muscle. We used tools to take the place of physical effort. So that the muscles don't atrophy, we invent new ways to use them. A citizen of the pre-industrial society would have found jogging a most unusual pastime, limited to the local village idiot and perhaps the landed gentry who didn't need to work. But now, the machines do the work, and we do physical exercise, vicarious work. When the information revolution brings machines that do our thinking too, how will we replace that activity? Intellectual jogging? "50 years ago, the economist John Maynard Keynes wrote, "We have been expressly evolved by nature, with all our impulses and deeper instincts, for the purpose of solving the economic problem. If the economic problem is solved, mankind will be deprived of its traditional purpose." But perhaps Keynes overlooked the more basic purpose and nature of humankind. Above all, we are a problem-solving animal. Human ingenuity created the new technology. If the machines bring with them problems of injustice and disruption, then it is up to that same human quality of ingenuity to find solutions.
Next week in the final programme of Discovery, we'll hear about the third eye, the story of the rediscovery of the pineal gland, the evolutionary third eye. That's next Thursday at 10 to 9 for the final Discovery programme on ABC.
Well, I hope you enjoyed it.